So welcome to Recruitment Reimagined, the executive podcast for unpacking the future of recruitment. I'm Ian Knowlson. This is my guest, Toby Raymond. And today we're going to be talking about the future of recruitment. Toby, do you want to introduce yourself? Please tell everybody your background and what you do.
So my name's Toby. I am a fractional CAIO. I'm the founder of an AI strategy company or AI automation consultancy called OptiB.
And you've also been involved in recruitment. You've been a recruitment consultant for 2-3 years, is that right?
Yeah, so I started in recruitment 3 years ago now. A lot's changed since that first week in recruitment, for sure.
And you personally use artificial intelligence and AI to augment and support your processes, and that's allowed you to basically increase your productivity to such a point that you can go on and effectively use your spare time to research AI and the tools that are available.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, AI has offered or opened up, massive sort of automation opportunities of repetitive and mundane tasks, especially in recruitment. I think recruitment's an industry that's rife. When I was, coming in sort of 2 years ago, I think probably 75% of time was actually spent on, doing administrative tasks, writing job descriptions. We did have to do that once upon a time, prepping CVs, getting them sent off. And then even just the back and forth conversation of, emailing candidates and clients and that communication side of things, that can definitely be, augmented or automated to a certain extent as well.
And from my part, obviously having been in recruitment now for 40 years, I've seen a lot of changes come in. And having worked all those years for Hayes and travelling around Europe, and now spending the last 10-15 years doing coaching and training of people all over the world, this does seem to me, and we were talking about this off camera, this does seem to me to be a pivotal point in the whole of the industry. Yeah. And I think it will go in a different direction.
Yeah, because you've lived through quite a few changes in the last 40 years, to say the least. I know we were on a conversation before about, fax machines, sending CVs in the post and stuff like that, which is just absolutely nuts to me. I didn't even think about that. And yeah, you've lived through a lot of changes. I think it's fair to say, from obviously, as I said, the fax machine before, all the way through to the smartphone and social media, which has had, a massive effect on recruitment. LinkedIn, obviously, being probably the biggest one on social media, I would assume. So yeah, it'd be interesting to hear your takes on, what you think, AI is gonna, basically almost sort of become. How big that change is actually going to be, sort of moving forward.
Well, a lot of the other technology changes when they came in, they replaced process that we were already using. They speeded up the process. So if we go from sending, as you quite rightly say, CVs out the door in the post to a client, and you'd wait 24, 48 hours for the CVs to arrive, and then you could talk through, to then faxing, to then emailing. CVs can be instant. Yeah. Now, all that's done is speed up the process, but it's one of those tools that eventually everybody gets. Yeah. So, you might have a fax machine today and somebody else doesn't, but eventually it all catches up.
100%.
What all of the changes have done, phones and everything, most of them have dehumanized the process. They've taken out the human, and they've kind of tried to commoditize recruitment. Yeah. For me, what artificial intelligence is doing, it's the opposite. Yeah. It's taking out the process that is non-human, that can be automated easily, and it's putting the human front and centre.
Yeah, back in it, really. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think, AI is having a positive impact on that, actually, and people should be looking at it from a way that it's actually opening up opportunities for humans to do what humans should be doing, which is having conversations, face-to-face meetings, go into more networking events, things like that. I think AI is having a massive impact in actually giving humans back their time to be more human, which I think is absolutely fantastic.
I mean, the thing I find fascinating, and the reason why I've asked you to come on the podcast, for me, is quite simply this: that I talk, because I've been looking into this now for about 18 months, 2 years.
Yeah.
But what I like about you, Toby, is you're walking the talk.
Yeah.
You have been a recruitment consultant. You still are a recruitment today.
Yeah.
You still do have clients and candidates. So these tools, these processes that people talk about in theory, you're actually using them.
100%.
And you're a small to medium size employer. So then 90% of the businesses that will be listening to this, the executives, they'll be running small to medium-sized recruitment companies. I don't know, anything from 1.5 to 20 million pound turnover businesses.
Yeah.
And you're using these tools yourself. So maybe just enlighten us as to the productivity savings that you've managed to get and how you've used it. So just talk about the candidate journey for a start off.
Yeah, I think it's good to start from my personal journey and where I was sort of 3 years ago coming into recruitment. So as I touched on before, we were writing our own job adverts, we were doing our own cover sheets and things like that. From that sort of front end, recruitment side. And I think, fast forward sort of a few months from when I first started, ChatGPT came out, and I started using it at the start of 2023. And as soon as I started using that, I knew recruitment was gonna change, or the working life or business life was going to change from that point. Moving forward, a few years from that.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying, and it's interesting because when we've talked several times over the last few months.
Yeah.
And I remember you and I sitting down and working out the savings, the time savings.
Yeah.
We talked about how you can now create a series of AI agents, as you've called them. Some people call them custom chat GPTs, but you've gone beyond that. But the interesting thing is that you can string these together. So you can get a candidate job, you can speak to a candidate, you can then take that information, put it directly into a customer relationship management system, CRM, applicant tracking system, ATS. You can then, and that can be automated. That would have taken you 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You're then putting that information. You're creating a job advert from a client. You can do that easily. You can create a cover sheet.
Yeah.
That would have saved you probably about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And if we can talk to people out there who are, one of the other things that is not obvious to the viewers and the listeners is that you are slightly dyslexic.
Yeah.
So you put an awful lot of your own thought and mental process
100%
into the candidates when you're talking. So explain how you've used technology and AI to, take away that diversity disadvantage, if you want to call it.
Yeah, I think you've touched on it there. When I'm producing content, especially written content, it takes a lot of brain power, and it takes me a long time to actually process things as well, and process information. I think the first key point is an AI note taker. I think we're already seeing, obviously, AI note takers have a massive impact on the recruitment industry. From sort of Zoom call note takers to actual note takers on your phone. That allows me to really focus in on the conversation that we're actually having with the candidate or the client and what we're trying to get from that conversation. So I don't have to, double think about trying to take notes whilst trying to actually listen as well. And then, you can take that transcript and really, mold it into whatever you'd want sort of moving forward. So obviously we touched on that, front sheet, cover sheet is a big example where you can take the transcript from the candidate call, you take the job description and you can take the candidate CV, put all that information into a pre-made tool, and then you can actually go ahead and output that information into whatever template you'd want. And that's, something that I've personally built out for quite a few clients of mine, that's saving them loads and loads of time. I think we worked it out, and it was saving me, 6-7 hours a week just on that one task.
Wow.
But as I said, that's just one very small part of recruitment, right?
So that's a day.
Yeah, I mean, I was targeted on, sending 6 CVs 6 CVs a week, and yeah, you said it probably saved me around an hour if we look at all the
so what's interesting
information.
And this is how artificial intelligence is going to change the world, is or has the potential to change the world, let's put it that way. I know as a trainer that if you take an inexperienced recruiter and you take an expert recruiter, the expert recruiter has listening to a much, much higher level.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you read Stephen Covey's book, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he talks about 5 levels of listening.
Yeah.
And trainee recruiters are listening at level 1, possibly level 2. And level 1 means you're listening and you're hearing what's being said and you're internalising what it means to you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're a recruiter and you're supposed to be guiding a candidate through a process, whether that's temporary or permanent, it doesn't matter, you have to empathise, you have to understand the candidate, you have to understand what they're feeling. And we know from research over the last 40 or 50 years that as human beings, information is given to us not just in the verbal word that's spoken, but also in body language, reading people's body language, listening to their tone of voice, listening to the hesitations. Mm-hmm. I used to say to my trainees that were working with me, sometimes you have to listen to what is not being said by a candidate rather than what is being said. Particularly when you're talking through with a candidate about whether they like the idea of a job or whether they like the idea of the offer that's been made to them by the client. How they respond to that, the words they use, the inflections in their voice, the hesitations, that tells you a lot. Now, the great thing about artificial intelligence and note takers is, and please don't take this the wrong way, but you personally, if you're dyslexic and you're writing notes, you won't be 100% focused on the person who's listening. 100%. You won't be hearing all those things. So have you noticed since the note taker's been used that you... Yes.
Well, to put it simply, and I think the really interesting thing here is actually that you can go ahead and connect that note taker to your CRM. So you've got, even them small conversations that you might not necessarily take notes on, you've got a transcript there in your CRM that you can go back and refer to.
That's fascinating.
And then you can really start to pick up on the details of, these smaller conversations as well. And even... Go on, sorry.
So that's fascinating. So, and we'll touch on this later on in the series, because I think you've very kindly agreed to come back and share with the execs on the podcast and our listeners more of your insights. But I find it fascinating then, as an executive, if that data is being recorded, and I know from going back 20, 30 years ago when I worked for Hayes that candidates and consultants were not putting details of candidate call, client calls on CRMs. Now I know technology has moved on, and with tools like Cloud Call, where you can actually have a situation where candidates talking on their mobile phones, the information is recorded, the details that are then put onto the CRM. That can save money, but what we're talking about here is more data going in. And, we've talked about this offline. The world we're in, data is fundamentally important to an executive making decisions. So that data is now going into the CRM, which now means that as an exec, I can use tools to analyse the data on my CRM, can look at conversations, how long they've lasted, the questions that were asked. That's fantastic. That's amazing.
I think, I think if you're a leader in the space and, you're, let's say, doing some training or some sales call training, you're going to have instant access to them transcripts of them calls in your CRM. And you could, potentially pull them out and use a tool like ChatGPT to go ahead and analyze that call and maybe give you a few pointers as a leader as well, in terms of how you can actually go ahead and coach that specific person.
And I think, to me, that's really important, because what you're doing is you're then feeding that back in to your decision making. So as a coach and a trainer, I mean, if I'm observing somebody, I hear what they're saying, the language they're using, the consequential impacts of using that language. You can then feed that back into your training, and you've got evidence to say, if you say X, you'll get this response. If you say Y, you'll get that response.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's not just sort of note taking and calls that you can then go ahead and import into your CRM. You can connect your CRM to various different tools. There's a lot of data out there to be had on the internet and things like that as well, which you can then...
Tell me more. What sort of things can you use AI for?
I mean,
Are we talking about business development here?
Well, we can talk about it in a business development sort of light. Obviously, every company's got their own website and, is advertising their own jobs, for example. You can use tools and platforms, or business development tools and platforms now that can monitor, where the jobs are, or, where certain companies are hiring, where the trends are. And then you can go ahead and actually pull that data through, and you might be able to find a decision maker at that company and then write a personalized email to that specific person about them specific jobs.
Wow.
But I think, the real key...
Just slow down.
Yeah,
so what you're actually saying is you can use an AI agent to research the internet, to find companies that are looking, and we're clearly talking about permanent staff.
Yeah.
Although we can later talk about how you can link this to a tool like Barber or Glenigan's, because that's in the construction sector. And you can find where there are potentials for temporary jobs. But let's just come back, talk about the permanent situation. So you use your AI agent, it can go out, it can trawl the internet, it can look for jobs for a particular candidate. So it's quite personal. You can say, I interviewed Jane Smith or John Doe yesterday, and they've got these skills. Please find me companies that are currently have vacancies on their websites right now. You can set that off looking. Yeah. It comes back, and then you say what then? You're then able to find out who the key contact is. And does that mean you have to point that at LinkedIn?
Or? Yeah, if the data is there, and we'll probably go through the exact tools in a further sort of episode, but yeah, I think obviously the internet is sort of full of data where people have imported their emails into things and stuff like that, and I think LinkedIn is a big database for that as well. But yeah, you can have an automated sequence or an AI agent go out and look for them things for you, or look for a specific role, and then try and find the decision maker in that company that might be dealing with that role. Or a lot of obviously job advertisements have the internal recruiter that's maybe hiring for that position at the bottom of it, be able to pull that information off and then write a personalized email to that person.
And you've made good money. You've made placements. You've invoiced customers using this sort of process.
Yeah. I think.
So why haven't you formed your own recruitment agency?
Well,
you're thinking about it. Okay. Well, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So if you were to do that, how many days a week do you think you'd have to work to be able to create a reasonable living?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if the days in the week necessarily goes down. It depends how you want to use your time, right? Yeah. I mean, I don't mind speaking about it. I mean, I'm looking at obviously formulating my own recruitment company within engineering at the moment, which is quite an exciting development for me. And I will run that alongside my AI automation consultancy, and take a lot of the tooling and a lot of the the expertise that I have in that area, and I'm currently building out the AI infrastructure for my own recruitment company, which will make me hyper efficient for a start, but it will also allow me to focus my time on where we as recruiters bring the most value. I think, which is as them things that we went through at the start, which is speaking to people on the phone, empathy, persuasion, all these areas that AI can't sort of emulate at the moment. I think it's about trying to take the most amount of time to focus on that side of things, if that makes sense.
It does.
But I think the automation and the AI agent sort of process, everything's going to be built off my own data. So I guess this brings us on to another point, is that obviously we're seeing a lot of CRMs and a lot of enterprise companies that are entering the AI space at the moment. But I actually feel like there's not a lot of room to actually build the tools off your own data. So, it's almost like fitting thousands of companies under one hood. which I can see almost ripping the heart of recruitment a little bit. So I think that's where we opt to be, and myself bring value in terms of, any AI tooling that we would build, we will build it off, a company's specific data, how they like to work, their specific tech stacks. We knit them all together in an automated fashion.
And you're already selling, working with companies as a chief AI officer, and we've talked off. I mean, you and I have known each other for years.
Yeah.
We've talked on AI about this now for about 12 months.
Yeah.
And what I find fascinating, we talked about this off camera, is the AI journey you've been on.
Yeah.
So our audience today are probably, some of them will be coming at this brand new. They aren't even on the foothills.
Yeah.
And yet you've climbed over one hill, you've gone over a second, you're onto the third now, because what you were telling me offline is that the AI businesses out there are generating more and more efficient and effective tools. 100%. And it must almost be impossible for a recruitment exec to know what are the tools available both today, yesterday, and potentially what's going to be in the future.
100%.
I mean, you and I were talking last summer about ChatGPT 4.5 and the potential and what it would do, and I remember talking to other people, and I'm hoping we're going to get some more people on the podcast who I was speaking to as well, who and that's now here, it's live, and there's a research tool within ChatGPT, so again, I know you can use that to do some deep research. We've talked about how we were looking at ChatGPT AI agents in the summer, and now we're talking about projects, and that's a new feature within ChatGPT, and you were saying to me you can create a project brain. So if you were recruiting for a company, like, I don't know, and I'm naming this company out there in the world, so I don't know, maybe AMEC or Amy or Murphy's or somebody like that, you could build for your own business an Amy tool that knows all about recruiting for Amy, what they're... Is that right?
Yeah, no, 100%. Obviously I think we've gone past almost past the GPTs phase, which is, GPTs, where you can give it, core instructions and give it, give the AI a bit of a knowledge base to actually produce a certain outcome. What I actually use the most at the moment is the projects tool. So, obviously you can, essentially when I get a new client through the door, we have that conversation about, what jobs they need, that initial qualification call. They might send over a few job descriptions or whatnot if they have access to them. So what I will do is I will create a new project around that specific client, and I will provide the knowledge base with, the transcript of that original call, the job descriptions, any extra information I can find from their website and things like that. And then you can go ahead and use the project tools. Let's say, for example, you're on a call with a candidate and they're asking you a certain question that you might not know straight away. Give me 2 seconds, I'll find that out for you. Ask the ChatGPT and it instantly finds that information for you. I mean, that's just one example. You can then start using that brain to then almost tailor your communication to your client or things like that. It's really interesting and fascinating.
So I'm conscious we're coming towards the end of our time today. And obviously, you very kindly agreed to come back and talk to us again about other topics and other elements and how you've used this. And it is very interesting. But what I think you're saying, which is the topic of the whole series, is that recruitment execs need to reimagine their whole recruitment business, what it will look like in 5 years' time, the service they provide, what markets they're in, because this is all going to change. And I know from talking to other guests that we're going to have on in the future, that we in the industry of recruitment are going to be at the forefront of this artificial intelligence change. And it's very much that there is an opportunity for us. In fact, some would argue it is our responsibility to support society as it moves from, where we are today to the economy 3.0, not 2.0. 2.0 is where we are now. We're going to 3.0. Because if you can imagine two employers displacing a worker, an employer displacing two workers, my apologies, that worker or that vacancy that is left would be, you might not fill it with the same person that's left. You might have to create a hybrid role because you've automated some of the tasks of the worker because they've moved on.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I think, I think roles moving forward in almost, pretty much every walk of life are going to be fractionalized to a certain extent. So I think their job roles will be broken down.
Funny.
Yeah, and AI, they'll partner with AI to conduct part of their job role that they might have done 10, 15 years ago, and then they will focus on the area of that job role that they necessarily that AI can't sort of focus on.
I remember speaking at a conference, and we're going to have to wind up in a minute, but I remember speaking at a conference in for Cisco in 2019 or something like that. And I remember quoting to the audience that there are children at school and that would have been, I don't know, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. There are young children at school who will go into jobs that didn't exist.
Yeah.
And now we're living in that reality. Those jobs that those children, my grandchildren, your nieces and nephews, will move into. We're creating those roles today.
Yeah,
that's where we are.
Yeah,
Fascinating.
100%. I think their school system's got to change as well, quite a lot. But that's a different conversation, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I've got a good friend of mine on LinkedIn who would be the first to jump on that bandwagon.
Yeah.
So hold that thought. I might introduce you to Neville himself. I think that's going to be all it is for today. I think we've more or less come to the end of our allotted time. I think I'd like to thank you very much, Toby, for coming in.
Of course, it's been a pleasure. It's been great.
I hope you'll come back very soon.
Yeah.
There's a lot more we need to talk about. You've talked about tools we need to look at. I think there's a whole human capital issue, and I'm going to try and ask you if we can do a workshop where you can actually demonstrate live, potentially do a LinkedIn live, and you can demonstrate tools and how they work and how you've used them.
Yeah.
But I know you need to look at that and how you can afford that and how you can afford the time. I hasten to add. But thank you very much for coming today. Hopefully you'll join us again. Recruitment Execs, and we would love to support you in reimagining what your recruitment business will look like in 5 years' time. And it's goodbye from me and
goodbye from me.